right. Sometimes you do have to address issues that aren't exactly comfortable, and they don't endear you to the people that you would consider you part of their camp. But here goes. So the fact is that Donald Trump, as president, I think he's accomplished a lot for many causes that I believe in particular. You could just rattle off a few. Improving school choice as a cause throughout the country. There's more states where school choice has become a reality that's been embraced by the state houses. You could say the end of the Title IX regulations in schools. You could also say uh, the almost complete repeal of Obamacare. It's not total, but it's getting there. And there's a number of other ones. He is building the wall. This wasn't something I really cared about before he ran for president. And the truth is, I wasn't a huge Trump supporter when he was running. The truth was that I would probably have voted for a lot of candidates instead of Donald Trump. I was a Rand Paul supporter, and they didn't get along at the time. But yeah, he won me over to vote for him because there was finally someone who was really willing to take the gloves off against Hillary Clinton and the media. And that's not something to scoff at. But you still have to address the fact that he's he's human, and B, Donald Trump is wrong on a number of issues. The big issue right now, the biggest issue in this country that he's wrong on, is conceding any ground to gun control. This is something, if you know a certain YouTuber, her name is, I guess, the Plant of Reason, if you get what I'm saying. She went off today talking about how he was worse on gun control than anything that Obama ever was. And look, there's certainly evidence of this given this current push to ban silencers in the wake of the Virginia Beach shooting, or rather, they're called noise suppressors. And a lot of people would ask, well, do you really need a noise suppressor in order to defend yourself? Does the Second Amendment really cover noise suppressors? Isn't it just an accessory? I would say that people who keep saying this, they said the same thing about bump stocks, and they'll say the same thing eventually about scopes and about various. Look, I am no gun nut, but the fact of the matter is that you are supposed to have the Second Amendment right to bear arms, which shall not be infringed, and accessories, I think, should be part of it. Accessories make a part of the device. And I think it's ridiculous that we keep compromising. I think this is one of the reasons that I don't join the NRA, because they usually concede to this. You have to have people who are going to really be the people who run over the side of the trench and take fire, if you pardon the analogy in this case, when it comes to issues like firearms and the Second Amendment. The same reason, I know a lot of people who watch this channel are a little more anti-abortion. I certainly am pro-life. Why is it that the pro-life movement seems to have such a vibrancy at the moment? And the Second Amendment movement seems to be really staggering around and aimless. I think it has to do with public sympathy. I think it has to do with the fact that pro-life people are able to package themselves as defending innocent life, while the Second Amendment people, they have to avoid being blamed for taking innocent life. It's a very difficult situation, but those are two movements that I think you can be consistent about, and that Donald Trump needs to be. He can't be allowed to just impose rules and then people say, well, MAGA, look at everything else he's doing. It's great, whatever. No. the things that Donald Trump does wrong will have a longer lasting permanent effect than many of the things that he does right. And if you're a blind supporter of his, then you're no better than a lot of these Hillary Clinton fans or some of these people who continue to donate money to that scam artist Bernie Sanders. You have to be consistent. So, speaking of consistent, this is from TASS news agency, Russia's official news agency. I don't often look at their stuff because they don't necessarily have a lot of topics that I'm interested in. And to be fair, I don't think that they're really meant to be, useful as an editorial. I think they just release kind of official news from a Russian government perspective, which if you want to, I mean, these things are a reality. Every government has its official organ. Here in the U.S., I don't remember what it would be. Well, the Voice of America, for instance, could be one. Not NPR. NPR is basically beholden to one faction of our government. So it says Russia's Rosatom opens a subsidiary in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of people have been running around and criticizing Trump for enabling Saudi Arabia, giving them possibly soon, the wherewithal to develop a nuclear weapons, and that should be worrying. But you see here Russia is too, and at the moment it looks like what they're trying to build is more of a facility to create nuclear energy, but that could change. It really depends what type of nuclear fuel you're using. I think the uranium nuclear power plants are based on a fission process, and then the thorium plants, which I think are more common in Europe, those are based on a fusion process, which is much less destructive and is not given to weaponizing. So I don't know if this is a thorium reactor. My opinion would be if it's not a thorium reactor and it's a uranium reactor, this might be one of the dumbest moves of all time. We do not need Saudi Arabia of all countries to have any access to any sort of weapon of mass destruction. But we could be up the creek on this one. So that's another problem with the Trump administration. If it's true, okay, if it is true, okay, that we are giving them enriched uranium and giving them the wherewithal to develop nuclear power, which could, in the future, potentially create a nuclear weapon, this would be in the lose column for the Trumpster. I'm just saying. So, other news. So, Pete Buttigieg. This is all negative Trump news today. So, I don't want people to get the sense that I'm, cutting and running from bad news. So I'm sorry, but amidst all this winning, you have to recognize what the opposition is doing, and sometimes the bad plays that you're doing. And I think that Donald Trump, I think he's in good shape, but there's plenty of reason to worry. I'm just saying. It says Pete Buttigieg would cut some U.S. aid if Israel annexes the West Bank. Now, I want to say this. Pete Buttigieg is not going to be president. The guy was just caught. This is something that you could look up. It's a pretty big story now. In fact, he was drinking out of a bag. So this is John Miller. So you can see on Showtime, he was on this ridiculous show. I don't even know what show it is. And he's drinking out of a paper bag with these two dudes, on an Afro-American oriented show, let's call it. and he was pandering a lot. But now, a day later, he's Mr. Serious, and he's saying, "Oh, the U.S. should cut off aid to Israel if they annex the West Bank." I've said many times, I think that the U.S. aid should be cut anyway to almost all of these countries, and that includes Israel, because those countries, as long as they're dependent on foreign aid, they're not really able to fulfill their real potential or, make actual decisions as to their future. That's definitely the case in Israel's case. Sorry, that's definitely the case in Israel's example. The problem with continuing to supply foreign aid is that these countries, they see an incentive to keep the gravy train rolling, so they put off major decisions because they say, well, we can't reform let's say our transportation infrastructure and make it more cost effective. We can't do it because if we make it more cost effective, we won't be able to report about how much we need this much, this so much, and then we won't get the subsidy from the government, things like that. And in Israel's case, some of that money does come as foreign aid, which they do reinvest through contracts with major defense companies here. They reinvest it here in the U.S. to a certain extent. I think that Mayor Pete Buttigieg claiming, oh, he would cut some aid if Israel annexes the West Bank. Well, why wouldn't you say that you'd be willing to cut aid to all these countries? I'm in favor of that. Okay, the reason that they do this is because they have this false sense of what real justice is. It's not the United States' job to visit justice upon anyone, okay, unless those are countries that have attacked us or that are endangering the world order. For example, when there was German expansion during World War II, and obviously they were hostile to us, or Japanese expansion. Those are the easiest examples. And even then, there are people who will say, well, we shouldn't have gone to war for that. People are of the illusion. I don't know why I keep saying that, but they're of the illusion that if you sit around and do nothing, people will just start to behave themselves and, play in the garden. That's not the way the world works. There is a place in the middle between being the world police, which is what the Bushes wanted and what some of the Trump administration officials want, and being this total pacifist country with no military and where everybody walks around with their winkies hanging out in the sun. Now, another related issue. So anyway, before we move on, so we have one more article, but Buttigieg and other people, this is something he said where he would cut aid if Israel annexes the West Bank. Israel is not planning to annex the whole West Bank because it can't. There's most of the West Bank cities and residential areas are not places where Israelis live, and therefore they would gain nothing from doing it. It would actually be an added cost and would probably be more of a nuisance because it would ruin a lot of relationships with other countries. This isn't a right or wrong issue. This is an issue of practicality. So what Buttigieg is talking about is sort of a pipe dream. Now they're talking about annexing parts of the West Bank because those are blocks of residential areas where Jews have lived. So in some cases, they've lived there for 40 to 50 years. So, that's not something I guess that you expect everybody to be satisfied with, but it's not wholly unexpected given the current of the past few years. So, no, I think Buttigieg is nobody's asking you. Why don't you just shut up about it, talk about something else? And I'll tell you why they can't shut up about it, because the activist wing of the Democratic Party, these hardcore Palestinian activists, they want a real shift in foreign policy from the way it's been up until now. And that's the way they feel, but I would say that the best thing you can do when you're running for president, and they're asking you all these questions about foreign policy, and will you do trade deals with this country, and will you, lobby for the freedom of prisoners from that country, like what's happening in Hong Kong right now. I think most candidates should say, look, with all due respect, I'm running on a certain agenda here. Foreign policy issues, I think I'd have to defer to some of my staff or something. And if people can't get along with that answer, then maybe they shouldn't be running for president. You can't be too opinionated. Trump was saying the entire time when he was running that, look, I support Israel, whatever, but I want to make a deal. It's all about the deal. It's all about the deal. That's the way to talk. And Buttigieg just doesn't know how to do that because he's automatically throwing an ultimatum down, even in the middle of the primary race. Other news. Pompeo apparently said, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, apparently said the White House will push back against Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Semitism during a closed-door meeting that was off the record. This is not a good thing. Another bad thing about the Trump administration. I would be the first to tell you that I hate Jeremy Corbyn. This is not going to hurt Jeremy Corbyn. It's actually going to help Jeremy Corbyn because he can point to all of these instances where he was complaining about a Jewish conspiracy or Zionist conspiracy, whatever he wants to call it. And he'll say, look, I mean, things like this are happening. And I think you just have to look back at the past few years where the media has hyped up certain positions on election issues. For example, in Britain with the Brexit vote, the media was severely slanted towards the Remain side. And surprise, surprise, the Leave side won. And Barack Obama came in and had his whole putting you back in the back of the queue comments. That's another one that I think is a real infamous example. No, we shouldn't be, even somebody like Jeremy Corbyn, who's just a complete and utter idiot. You don't need to interfere in this country's election in order to, influence for him to lose, because Jeremy Corbyn's doing everything he can himself to make the Labour Party lose. So no, I don't think any reason is acceptable. It says in a leaked recording of the meeting obtained by the Washington Post, Pompeo was asked if in the event of Corbyn becoming prime minister, the Trump administration would you be willing to work with us to take on actions if life becomes very difficult for Jews in the UK? Pompeo responded, it could be that Mr. Corbyn manages to run the gauntlet and gets elected. It's possible. You should know we won't wait for him to do those things to begin to push back. We'll do our level best. It's too risky and too important and too hard once it's already happened. So I would say if you don't depend on the United States, you have to leave if you feel so threatened by Jeremy Corbyn. I personally, if I was living in the UK, it wouldn't depend on being Jewish to be threatened by Jeremy Corbyn. If you don't want your job to disappear because of the crashing economy under him, you should vote against Jeremy Corbyn. But some people just aren't that savvy. So, yeah, there's a number of things you have to point out with the Trump administration, that they're just all, they're a mess. And this cannot continue because these problems will begin to fester. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also, subscribe to me on Minds and on BitChute and on Subscribestar if you want to donate. My screen name on all three of those is @Chef Leopard, and on Gab, you can find me there @Starscream85.